Now let's look at the main session. So, an example of a main session. So, in this example, we're going to take a young hurdler, and we're going to go right through the warm-up, the activation, the mobilization, the potentiation, examples of the main session. I'll show you some little videos and clips and stuff so you've got a good idea of the sort of things that you can do in a training session. So let's just quickly talk through everything, and then we can watch some videos so you've got some live examples of exactly what exercises you can do with your athletes. So the athlete turns up, we're going to do 2 laps of jogging and skipping just to raise the body temperature. Then we're going to do some activation work. So we're going to start with the hips, then we're going to start with the legs, then we're going to do some dynamic leg movements, then we're going to work the shoulders and the core muscles. So let's have a look now at some examples here of activation exercises. So I think you can see there from the exercises that they were dynamic in nature. There wasn't any static stretching or anything like that in there. It was very, very dynamic in nature. So lots of full body movement. So even though the crab walks, the cariokas were focusing on the hip, there was other stuff being worked as well. The legs, the dynamic legs, the shoulders, the core, there's lots of good movement going on. So I now want to talk through the mobilization. So we've got, we're going to follow the process of the hip, then the back, and then just some general hurdle mobility exercises, hurdle walkovers. You can see here how she's moving the legs quite dynamically as she's doing these hamstring curls. Now we're bringing some lateral movement in, some crossovers. And some standing hip circles now. Bringing a circular motion into these exercises. Now we're working on the back specifically, but this is a hurdle specific back exercise. It requires a little bit of coordination and practice. And this is another hurdle leg exchange exercise. Notice how dynamic it is, that we're not holding the stretch for very long at all. This is a really nice back exercise called scorpions. Again, notice we're not holding the exercise for very long. So it's a very dynamic exercise. So now we're going to do some hurdle walkover exercises. Now, hurdle walkovers are great for all athletes. You don't need to be a hurdler. These aren't hurdle exercises. These are mobility exercises. Fantastic for the hips, really good for the lower back. And all athletes should be doing hurdle mobility work, in my opinion. This is a nice exercise because it's teaching the athlete rhythm as well. So rhythm is a really important part to athletics. So we're getting some mobility work, also some rhythm as well, which is really important. And then finally, we're looking at some potentiation exercises. So like I said, I talked at the start about having different units of work in the same training session. And the benefits of that are that if you don't see an athlete too much in a week, maybe 3 times a week, that you can work on lots of different elements, different skills. So an example of this training session, I'm just going to put some very light movement and teaching skills of weightlifting and some running coordination drills before we start the real main bulk of the session. So just have a look at some of these exercises. This is an overhead squat. It's a fantastic exercise, and with young athletes you can start with just a light bar or maybe a broom handle or a stick or something, a hockey stick or anything like that. This is a hang clean, and again with younger athletes you just want to teach the movement. The weight isn't important. And this is a hang snatch, so now we're putting the bar over the head. And again, with younger athletes, the movement is the most important thing. Now let's look at some running and coordination drills. So these are stiffness jumps. So the idea here is the athlete will land 2-footed and try not to bend the legs. Keep the legs nice and stiff. This is an exercise to start teaching the running cycle. Now we're doing whip through, so we're trying to race the legs here. So the leg that starts up, you're trying to race that down and then race the other leg up and see which one wins. And then this is a double knee whip through. This is quite a complicated, complex drill. So you would only do that exercise with athletes that have mastered the other exercises. Our second example is under 16 sprinter male. So let's now look at some examples of our under 16 male athletes. So we want to follow exactly the same format of ramp warm-up. So we want to raise the body temperature, we want to activate the joints, we want to mobilize the muscles, and then we want to potentiate or prime the muscles for the main session. So we're going to do 2 laps, the jog and a skip. Then we're going to do some activation work. Again, following exactly the same pattern that we did before, but now we've got some slightly different exercises. So the first exercise is single leg forward bow. So we're just arms out to the side and you're just rocking forward and keeping the leg straight. Sometimes this is known as an arabesque as well. It's a really good exercise for the hamstrings. And now we're just going to do some work on the hip with some, what we call some fire hydrant exercises. So you can see how he's mobilizing the hip. He's adding some rotation and extension of the leg, which will help warm up the hip joint and all the muscles and stuff around the hip joint. Now he's coming the other way, so he's gone back. Now he's coming forward. And now he's going across the body. So we're actually now working in different planes of movement. So we're not just going backwards and forwards like we do when we run. In our warm-up exercises, we're going side to side, back to forward, twisting, turning. So we're adding lots of different movements into the exercises. Now he's doing what's called a donkey kick at the end there. That's another good exercise for the hips as well. So now we're going into a lunge circuit. So this is the leg exercises now. So he's as you notice, he's going on different positions here. So he's going backwards, out to the side, out to the side, and then the front. So you can actually look at it like a face of a clock. 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and you can use those references with the athletes. So you can say, I want you to lunge 2 o'clock, and they will go at 2 o'clock, or lunge at 6 o'clock, which would be behind them. This is a dynamic leg exercise, single leg hop drives, hop jumps. And now we've got lunge switches. Really good exercise to get the legs really primed for exercise. Onto the shoulders, so crossover diagonal. So again, we're adding a different plane of movement in here. And now we're just doing some wall angels. So an athlete is using the wall as a guide so they don't lose their posture. And they're trying to reach as high as they can to get really good extension of the arms around the shoulders. And now we've got some core exercises. So this is an Alekna exercise. So alternate arm, alternate leg. You want to extend the leg, extend the arm, and you want to keep the leg from touching the ground. Now this is a plank exercise, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but we're going to push slightly forward and back. So we're going to just roll over the elbows and over the ankles, forwards and backwards. So it's a plank with a little bit of complex in there. Again, if you've got less experienced athletes, maybe you'll just do a plank without any movement. But once they can do the plank, then you might want to add some little bit of complex or complexity to the plank and do some movements and stuff like that. Let's look now at some mobilization exercises, again, done in a dynamic way. These are inverted scissors. So again, movement in a different plane, lateral plane. Backwards and forwards plane now. And notice again that he's continually moving. So he's not holding any of these exercises. Glute switches. Glutes are the big muscles in the buttocks, and they need to be, warmed up well for sprinters. And we've got some thoracic rotation. This is for the back, namely the top of the back. And now we've got some seated thoracic rotation. So again, we're adding some rotation into these back warm-up exercises. Even though when we sprint, there's not a huge amount of rotation of the back, but we want to still warm up those exercises because it's training in disguise. Now we're doing some more hurdle drills. So even though our athlete is a sprinter, not a hurdler, they are still doing hurdle walkover exercises. Because this is not exercises, as I said earlier, specific to hurdlers. This is an exercise for all athletes. And it's really good for coordination, really good for hip mobility in particular, back mobility, rhythm. And there's lots and lots of different exercises that you can do over the hurdles. We would normally use around 6 to 8 hurdles. He's putting his hands on the hurdles there, just so he really has to work on holding his posture and really has to work on the hip flexor muscles. So if he doesn't have the hands on the side there, he would have more room to move from side to side and less control over the movement. So he's trying to basically put the hands on the side there to keep a very nice tight posture, and makes the exercise a little bit harder, but a lot more effective. And then we look at potentiation. So we can do some vertical jumps. I don't think my video is working on that, but then we can do some vertical jumps, literally just jumping as high as you can, as high as you can. And a vertical jump is a very important exercise for sprinters. There's a strong correlation of good vertical jump and sprint performance. Now let's look at some running and coordination drills. These will be mini hurdle runs. So similar to the cone runs we saw earlier, is teaching the athlete to step over and step down. The high knee overhead runs is the same, but now with a bar over your head, you could use a broom handle again, or if you don't have a stick, you could use a towel or anything like that. The idea is you put your hands over your head to stop rotation and to also encourage good posture and the athlete being tall.